important. I guess we're studying a community services course, and some of you will have had perhaps some experience. To set the picture, we did a little mind map, and I'm just showing that now on the screen. Sorry about my messy writing, but if you look at the community services sector in the middle and you just work your way around, you've got things like the justice system, a little bit about, I think first we sort of suggested, well, how do people feel when they first maybe come in contact with a service? And that could be ranging from things like happy and joy and relief to being ashamed, scared, frustrated, annoyed. I guess what I'm saying, there's a whole range of emotions that a person is likely or could feel, and being part of being a good listener, as connecting with people, and the subject's called use communication to build relationships. So I guess that starting point is active listening. So we just had a quick chat, and again looked at the board, and just from the top of our heads, what are the things we do to show that we're listening non-verbally. So things like good eye contact, and we did mention that being mindful of cultural differences there is important. So not all cultures like direct eye contact, and we don't want to be staring people down either, but at least some respectful and culturally appropriate eye contact. We spoke about body language and that little acronym SOLER, solar. I mean, the S was sort of like that square on, but you're slightly offset, and we demonstrated that. So you're not directly butting up, directly to someone. And of course, we were social distancing when we did this, but a little bit to the side-ish, but we're still with an open posture. That's not having your arms and your legs crossed and looking like you don't want to be there. The L for lean, occasionally leaning forward, which I guess showing that you're attentive rather than leaning back, I suppose, hands behind the head, that sort of thing. Would be, I guess, a body language expert might have a comment on that, saying something about, it's a dominant or superiority, sort of, you're conveying that sort of image if you're leaning back with the hands behind the head. But it's more about leaning forward. Eye contact we've mentioned, appropriate eye contact. Then the R was relaxed, so that SOLER, something you might hear about. The nodding was mentioned as well. And I guess that non-verbal is also, or being attentive, just checking in, what you're picking up on the person that you're talking with from their body language will give you a sense of how they're feeling as well. Some of the verbal stuff, we had a quick, things that you do to help listen when you're verbally listening. We spoke about the minimal encourages. That's down in the middle of that list, but that's just that yes, going yes or not, often it goes with your nodding. Sort of thing. We spoke about good questioning, like you open and closed, and to me, we spent a little bit of time looking at the value of open questions. So the idea of a good open question helps people explain or talk a little bit more about themselves. So we're not talking about ourselves. We're really interested, and although we might hear things that we'd like to challenge, we don't say you shouldn't do that necessarily. And I've got on the blockers or the side of the things that get in the way of good communication is the word should. So rather than should, we spoke about the use of questions like, have you thought about what would happen if you did X, Y, and Z? What would happen if you tried to do this? So we're not saying you should do this. We're asking people to think about what might happen if they tried to do X, Y, and Z. What would happen if you tried to contact a refuge, rather than saying you should you should just go and pack up and live in a refuge. Perhaps we're talking to someone dealing with violence at home. You should just leave. What would make it? Or what would happen if you tried to make contact with a refuge? So we can hear that story a little bit more. What do you think would happen if you rang a refuge? How would you go about contacting a refuge? Have you thought about how you might be able to contact a refuge? Things like that, rather than saying you should do this or you do that. So it really gives people a chance to talk. All right, so what are the other things in the verbal stuff? Paraphrasing, that's about getting a big chunk of information and putting it back in your own words. So it's not repeating back in what exactly the person said, but it's condensing it. So I've already given quite a little bit of info, and to paraphrase it, I've so you're giving a little bit of info about what you covered today, and you looked at the community service sector as a whole, and now you're talking about good communication and active listening skills. There's a little paraphrase of where we've been so far. Summary is a little skill that you might use when you're getting towards the end of a conversation or a meeting with someone, where you just sort of wrap it up and say, well, we've spoken about this and that, and what we're going to do next, or what's going to happen next is this and that, and if it's okay, I might do this, and we'll see about meeting next week on a Friday or something like that. So, the summary pulls it together. Time and space, so not looking or seeing that you're rushed, giving the appropriate space. Space there in that context that we've mentioned on the board is about giving people time and opportunity to have their say. You don't need to feel like you've got to fill in every gap with any gap in the conversation with you chattering and talking. A little bit of space is fine, and some silence is fine, and that might be someone just gathering their thoughts and ready to talk. So if you don't give that space, then that, you might be cutting them off. And empathy is an important skill from my perspective, to show that you're really listening to someone. And empathy is about identifying the feeling from the body language that people are showing and the words that they're saying. You can sort of tap in and show that I'm really listening by saying, I can see that you're really frustrated by the situation, or I can see that you're angry, or I can see that you're concerned. So identifying the appropriate language, the appropriate emotion, and naming it, that's empathy, and it really shows that people are listening. And we had a list of empathy words already on the wall here that we just referred to. It's good to have a bank of words in your vocabulary, or good to look at words from time to time and say, yeah, I might be able to use that one in the right circumstance. It's good to just broaden your grasp on all the different emotions. There's a lot of them out there, and if you're not 100% sure what someone's feeling, you can always say seems. It seems like you're pretty frustrated, and they may say, not frustrated, I'm more just pissed off, and I consider pissed off as an emotion. Blockers. So blockers are things that might get in the way of a good conversation and good listening. So if you're just talking about yourself, I remember a time I was homeless, blah, ramble. And it's not about you. If you sort of start talking all about your story, it's really about listening to someone else's story, to be honest. Someone mentioned in the group you're being aware of your own bias, and I've got to say, and Bella, obviously, we spent a bit of time on this last course, but we all have our biases as in part of the world that we grow up in. If we just be aware of those, and so we can manage those and take steps to address them if need be. But for me, growing up as a male in the era that I grew up, there was certainly some male privilege and expectations, certain roles are males and certain roles are females, that sort of thing. So ingrained in that, there is certainly some bias around gender that I've got to be mindful of and try and manage. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and perhaps none of us ever will be, but we certainly got to keep trying. Cultural differences and religion, being mindful of that. Religion was mentioned about not pushing a particular religious barrow is important when you're trying to listen and connect to people. If they've got a religion they want to talk about, that's good, but it's not about us pushing our religion onto people. Time as a blocker, looking rushed, or saying, is this going to take long, looking at the watch, things like that. And I've mentioned the word should down there. So they're the blockers. And what we did... All right, we moved to the person-centered practices is one of our definitions. So for me, a lot of this info I've drawn, I think, from... Well, certainly the Aspire Learner Guide for this unit, I've referenced that. And I had a good read of the Life Without Barriers information on person-centered practice, and Life Without Barriers specialises in particular about working with the people with disability. And, I guess that's working in that disability space. That person-centered approach is at the core of it, I would argue, in many cases, or with many services. It means that the individual's at the centre of all the decisions that relate to their life. And it's about looking and working with the person's strengths, not seeing them as useless or hopeless or a problem, but they have strengths. Everyone has strengths. And that's central in that discussion and the planning. And people receiving support are part of part in selecting the services they want. And I guess in a sense the NDIS kind of comes from that philosophy. All right, we might have a look at a role play situation. In fact, what I might do, let's have a look at the basic active listening skills, in a sense. I don't know if it's basic, but I'll just go through. This is a TAFE video that's been put out, and let's just have a look at that, how those skills are used, whether you see this before or after this little activity. I'm not quite sure at this point, but let's have a look at using your good active listening, verbal, non-verbal, open and closed questions, empathy, building rapport, paraphrasing, all those sorts of things.
Natasha, thank you for coming today. How did you get here? Did you travel by car or train? How did you find the traffic?
Yeah, I drove today and the traffic wasn't too bad actually. I got here in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh, that's good. I was held up. There was a big smash on the road, so it took me a little bit longer. So I'm glad that you were able to make it in.
Thank you.
That's good. Julie, I'm glad that you've made the effort to come in today. How did you hear about our service?
Well, I was talking to a friend and saying that I thought I might benefit from having a chat to somebody, and she told me that one of her friends had actually come to your service before and said that it was very good.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming in. When you came in, you filled out some forms, which the girls have given me, which is great. So that gives me a little bit of a background to where you're from and things of that nature. And I just wanted to start by saying that our service is a counselling service for women, and therefore you fit that category, which is really good. Now, I just wanted to let you know that this is our first initial interview, I guess. So today we will be just I'll be hearing some of your story, and we'll work through a little bit of a process, and then I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to meet again. Is that okay?
That sounds good, thank you.
Excellent. Now, within the pack that I've given you, or the girls at the front have given you, Julie, there is some information on how we keep your privacy and confidentiality. So I just wanted to clarify that before we go into our session today. So within the community the community centre here, we do everything that you say to me today is kept within a confidential environment. However, I am a mandatory reporter, which means that if you tell me something that I feel that you may be at risk, or you may be at risk of harm to yourself or hurting someone else, if you have children, if they may be at risk, or if you're participating in illegal activity, I am a mandatory reporter and I will need to let somebody know about that so that we can try to get you some help and assistance in dealing with that particular situation. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. I understand. Thank you.
Excellent. So Julie, let's just start by what has brought you here today?
Well, my husband and I have been fighting on and off the last couple of months, and I'm just noticing that we can't seem to come to any agreement lately. I'm losing sleep, I'm feeling exhausted, and I'm at a point where I feel like I might like to leave the marriage.
Okay, how long have you been married for?
We've been together for 8 years.
Oh, wow, okay. That's a decent amount of time. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any children?
Yes, we have 3 children. I have 2 little ones that are under 5, and we have a 7-year-old who's at school.
Okay, so you must be kept busy then.
I'm always very busy. There's just always so much to do, and I'm really feeling very tired.
Okay. And the children today, whereabouts, who's looking after them today for you?
Well, my 2 younger children today are being cared for by my mum, and my oldest one is at school today.
Excellent. And where's your husband today?
He's gone to work.
Okay, that's good. So it seems as if you're at a point in your marriage where you're feeling as if the marriage has changed a little bit in its focus, and you're kind of a little bit worried about what the future holds for yourself and your husband.
I am. I feel now that that I can't come to any solution with the problems, and he's been drinking a lot, and he always enjoyed a social drink when we first got married, but I'm noticing now that he's drinking more and more. He seems to be drinking most days of the week, and when he does drink, he's very, very difficult to talk to.
So the alcohol seems to be a problem. Do you think that might be relating to the change in behaviour that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I do. I think that the drinking has definitely changed his behaviour significantly, and he's very unreasonable, and he has a very short fuse. He's very, very easy to make angry over the smallest of things.
Okay, so that must be difficult for you and the children. Have you noticed if the children have picked up on the change in his behaviour?
Well, he does have a very good relationship with the children, and he actively participates in their daily lives, and the children haven't mentioned anything to me, and they don't seem to have changed their behaviour in any way. The arguments don't tend to happen in front of the children either.
Okay. Are the arguments something that, is it over more trivial things, or does it sort of, are there big key things that you're kind of arguing with him about?
Well, the arguments can start over something small. It can be just a simple argument over a task in the house. That can escalate into an argument about his family, or about my mother, or about money issues, and it just seems to escalate out of control.
Okay. So, Julie, have you, in terms of his drinking, I'm kind of just trying to ascertain maybe what has developed in your marriage that's taken you to the point that potentially, you've come to see me today, and it appears as if the drinking is really the focus of perhaps your feeling of wanting to disconnect from the marriage and feeling isolated within the marriage. Would that be right?
That's true. That's right. I think the drinking is my main issue with his behaviour, and I think the drinking is greatly contributing to the way that he's behaving towards me.
Okay. Have you spoken to him about this?
I have. I've tried to talk to him about the drinking a couple of times, and he just gets very, very defensive with me.
Potentially he's not acknowledging then that he may have a drinking problem.
That's true. That's correct, yes.
Okay. I can understand that this must be difficult for you, Julie, and I'm pleased that you've come here today to try to, work through some of these issues. Now, Julie, in terms of, I guess, your commitment to the marriage, in terms of where you want the marriage kind of to go, do you think that you have a strong base that you can potentially, if we were able to help your husband with the drinking side of things, that your marriage itself might be strong enough to overcome and to move forward in the relationship? Or tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are with that.
Well, I'm hopeful that we could resolve the issues that we're having, and although at the moment I feel like I need a break away from him, if he was able to get the support that he needed and we were able to get the support together, I think that I would be willing to give the marriage an opportunity to continue and to resolve our issues.
Okay. Julie, in terms of your own support, you mentioned your mum's looking after the children today. Would you consider yourself to have friends and family that have you spoken to anyone else about this issue?
Well, I have. I spoke to my girlfriend who recommended your service, and she's a very good support to me and to the children. And I have a very supportive family network as well. I have sisters who live in Sydney, and also my mum, so they're all around me and they're very, very caring towards me.
Have any of any of the family or friends noticed a change in your husband's behaviour?
Yes, I have. Actually, recently we had a social function, and my brother did comment to me on how much alcohol my husband consumed at this social event.
Okay. So this is impacting on you as well as the extended family as well. Well, it's really good to hear that you do have a support network outside of this room, I guess, which is really, really good, and that it's great that you've got that, and I'd encourage you to use your mum and your family and friends, as a gentle ear to listen to help you support yourself and the children through this phase or this stage in your relationship with your husband. So, Julie, I'm just trying to think about potentially, just to recap, so you're saying that your relationship with your husband has changed from what it was. You've been with him for about 8 years and you have got 3 children. You've mentioned that the primary change is his behaviour, and that you believe that it probably is linked to his change in drinking habits.
That's right.
And from what I understand, you've expressed that you would be happy to potentially work with him to resolve or seek help for him in relation to his drinking habits. How do you, would that be right in what I've said there?
Yes, that's right. That's correct. I would be happy to work on things if he was willing to do that as well.
Not knowing your husband, I guess I would probably need to ask you, do you think that your husband would be receptive to maybe some marriage counselling or going to see somebody about his drinking? Is he the type of person that might be receptive to that? Or
I think he would. I think if I was able to approach him when he was calm and relaxed, I think that yes, he probably would be receptive to that.
Okay. That's positive. That's really good, because some people that I meet, the answer to that would be quite different. So I think that's really positive for you, Julie. I think what we probably need to look at now is maybe continuing this relationship between you and I. So I'd love to see you again and meet up with you again. But also too, I think we probably need to explore that avenue of either getting you some marriage counselling or something along those lines, as well as seeing whether or not your husband might be interested in looking at some services to help him with his drinking issues that he has. So if it's okay by you, what we might do from here is organise for us to meet again. What time is best for you?
Around this time is a good time for me, and any Thursday or Friday during the day is good.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll organise maybe for this time next week, and we'll meet again. But in the meantime, I think we probably need to put you in contact with the relationships counsellor, and we'll try to get that side of things going. And as a result of that, we'll be able to work out how receptive your husband is of potentially seeking some help for him as well. I would like to just say that you mentioned that you probably would like to escape a little bit from it at the moment. So perhaps I might be able to give you some advice or some information on, some things that you might be able to do to take yourself away from that situation if you feel as if, it's a little bit too much. Maybe you might like to tap into your mum or your family and friends as well if you don't feel comfortable using some of the other services in the area. How do you feel about that?
Well, that would be good. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Julie, for taking the time. I'm really happy that you were able to come in today, and I look forward to going on this journey with you. It's not a solution. We can't, fix everything here today. It will be a process, and but hopefully together, we can see a really positive outcome for you and your family.
Oh, thank you very much for talking to me today. That's been great. Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much.
A little slide there from Brene Brown. She comes up with some good stuff, and I remember showing this I showed this slide last semester. Someone said, yeah, they were familiar with Brene, but what she's saying there around empathy, and I've sort of mentioned empathy a few times, but in order to empathise with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. So it's about belief and trust, and this is how people see it. So that's certainly in that building rapport stages. Written correspondence protocols and style guides in organisations. So what's that all about? So whether you're writing something digitally or on a hard copy paper, you're representing your organisation, and so you've got to be aware of organisation policy and procedures when you're doing so. So the organisation will set out guidelines for how you format letters, emails, and the etiquette, the language you use, the signing on, the signing off. Maybe there's promotional stuff that you've got to develop, flyers, posters, things like that. Someone in the organisation might need to check that. What about where forms are kept? And there might be protocols about how they're stored and filed. And who has the authority to sign particular documents? Now the next question, and we have a look at some cultural protocols in one of the questions. So I've got a slide on the cultural stuff. Being positive in our interactions, being mindful of someone's previous experiences, traumas, things like that. Helpful with forms if they're complicated. English might be a second, third language. Make sure you use someone's name. Being mindful of any biases or prejudices that may be out there, and use positive language, person first language. Include everyone if you're working with people with diverse backgrounds. Don't leave people out based on perhaps the communication might be poor. Normal voice, don't shouting or talking to someone like a child doesn't help, and be mindful of assumptions, which I've just said that. You might have heard those stereotypes, which aren't necessarily helpful either. Protocols, cross-cultural communication, so being respectful and listening, so all that active listening stuff is really important. Being adaptable and flexible could come in handy. Celebrate difference, and using simple, clear questions, and using interpreters, and policies and procedures should outline those sorts of protocols in a service. But there's a translating and interpreting service, TIS National, can be accessed. There's a number, 131450. It can be booked. Some of those questions are around sharing too much info, so it's not about sharing info to the service, but it's making sure that the person that you're working with, the client, is understanding what's going on. Just talk briefly about professional boundaries. So we're there to support people, but not be a friend. And so things like developing personal attachments and feelings, and giving someone more attention, phoning, texting clients out of work, getting gifts from clients, or inappropriate physical contact, kind of goes without saying, but it's there. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there.